To every alien species in the galaxy, there is one chemical that is strictly banned. They call it Stim-X. It is a combat drug so dangerous that possession of it is punishable by death. It turns a normal soldier into a mindless, unkillable monster that feels no pain. The Galactic Council destroys any ship found carrying it. But the aliens made a fatal mistake. They invited a human onto their ship. They saw him as weak, soft, and fragile. They did not know that the human body is actually a biological weapon factory. When pirates attacked the ship, they waited for the human to beg for mercy. Instead, their medical scanners started screaming a warning. The human hadn't injected the illegal drug. He had just gotten angry. The massive cargo ship, the Starhopper, floated silently near the Great Galactic Border Station. It was a busy checkpoint where hundreds of alien ships waited for inspection. Inside the ship's main hallway, the air was cold and smelled of engine oil. The crew stood in a straight line, looking very nervous. They were all different species from across the galaxy. Some had blue skin, some had 4 arms, and some looked like giant lizards with thick scales. But at the end of the line, there was only one human. His name was Alex. He was the ship's mechanic. Compared to the giant aliens around him, Alex looked small and soft. He stood there calmly, wiping grease off his hands with a dirty rag, looking bored. Suddenly, the airlock door hissed open. The Galactic Customs officer stomped into the room. It was a terrifying creature that looked like a giant praying mantis made of black steel. Its multiple eyes clicked and zoomed in on the crew. This officer was known for being strict and mean. In its clawed hand, it held a large, heavy scanner. The officer was looking for illegal items, but mostly, it was hunting for Stim-X. In this part of the galaxy, Stim-X was a Class 1 banned combat drug. It was a chemical that made soldiers go crazy, fight without pain, and gain super strength. Anyone caught with even 1 drop of Stim-X would be sent to prison for life. The officer moved down the line. It scanned the first crew member, a large rock creature. The machine beeped green. Safe. Then it moved to the captain, a tall, bird-like alien named Zorg. The scanner beeped green again. Safe. Finally, the insect officer stopped in front of Alex. The creature looked down at the human with deep suspicion. To the aliens, humans were a mystery. They looked so fragile. They had no hard shell, no sharp claws, and no acid spit. Humans seemed like the weakest species in the universe. The officer pointed the scanner right at Alex's chest. The room went silent. Captain Zorg held his breath, fearing the worst. The scanner hummed loudly near Alex's heart. Alex just stood there, thinking about the engine repairs he needed to finish. He was not scared. The light on the scanner turned green. Clean, the officer clicked in a robotic voice. This soft-skinned creature is too weak to handle combat drugs anyway. Even a small dose would stop his heart instantly. The officer laughed and walked away. Captain Zorg let out a long sigh of relief. He whispered to Alex that he was lucky to be so harmless. Zorg explained that Stim-X is a chemical called epinephrine, and it turns people into monsters. Alex blinked. He knew that word. Epinephrine. On Earth, humans called it adrenaline. He almost laughed out loud. These aliens were searching the ship for a banned drug. They did not know the truth. They did not know that inside Alex's body, 2 small glands were waiting to release that exact chemical. He wasn't carrying the drug in his pocket, he was a biological factory for it. As the officer left the ship, Alex smiled a secret smile. They thought he was the weakest thing on the ship, but he was actually the most dangerous weapon there, and nobody knew it yet. 3 days after the border check, the Starhopper was cruising through a dark and quiet patch of space. The crew was relaxed and working on their tasks. But suddenly, the silence was shattered violently. Red emergency lights started flashing, and a loud siren screamed through the metal hallways. The entire ship shook as if something massive had hit it from the side. It was not a meteor or an engine failure. It was a pirate attack. The alien crew members immediately panicked. They were simple traders and scientists, not soldiers. They ran in circles, screaming in their strange languages and hiding under tables. Captain Zorg's colorful feathers were shaking with pure fear. He shouted over the intercom to surrender immediately because he wanted no one to get hurt. But the attackers did not care about a peaceful surrender. A loud explosion blew the main cargo door off its hinges. Thick gray smoke filled the room, and heavy, thudding footsteps shook the metal floor. Out of the smoke walked the cracks. They were the nightmares of the galaxy. The cracks were 7 feet tall, covered in thick green scales, and had teeth as sharp as knives. They smelled like old meat and burning metal. The leader, a giant monster named Brutus, laughed loudly. He held a massive plasma club that looked heavy enough to crush a small car. The crew of the Starhopper fell to their knees, begging for mercy. Alex, however, did not kneel. He stood in the shadows near a stack of heavy crates, watching quietly. He held a heavy steel wrench in his hand, his grip so tight his knuckles turned white. Brutus was not just a thief, he was a bully who enjoyed causing pain. He walked over to the ship's medic, a small, gentle alien named Bip who looked like a fluffy creature. Bip was shaking and crying, holding a medical box. Brutus kicked the medical supplies across the room and grabbed Bip by the neck with one hand. The pirate laughed as he squeezed, lifting the small medic high into the air. The other crew members covered their eyes, too scared to look or help. They were paralyzed by biology. Their species evolved to freeze when death was near. They waited for the end, accepting their fate as weak prey. They could not move. But Alex was different. As he watched his friend Bip struggling to breathe, something ancient and terrifying woke up inside his human DNA. It started in his brain and shot down to his adrenal glands like a lightning bolt. A cold, electric feeling washed over his entire body. His hearing suddenly became very sharp. The sound of the siren faded away, and all he could hear was the beating of his own heart. It was getting faster and harder, like a drum. His vision tunneled, focusing only on the pirate leader. The fear vanished, replaced by a strange, cold anger. The chemical that the aliens called Stim-X was now flooding his veins, preparing his body for violence. The harmless human mechanic was gone. Alex stepped out from behind the heavy crates. He moved differently now. He did not walk like a tired mechanic anymore, he moved like a predator stalking its prey. His head was lowered, and his eyes were locked onto Brutus, the giant lizard pirate. The adrenaline in his blood was fully active. His pupils were so wide that his eyes looked almost black. His skin was pale and covered in a cold sweat because his body was pulling blood away from his skin to pump it into his muscles. To the alien crew, he looked sick. To a human, he looked ready to kill. He dragged the heavy steel wrench across the floor, making a loud scraping sound that echoed through the silent room. Brutus dropped the small medic, Bip, onto the floor and turned his massive body toward Alex. The pirate leader laughed a deep, rumbling laugh that shook his heavy armor. He looked at his crew and pointed at the small, soft human who dared to challenge him. Brutus thought this was a joke. He raised his plasma club, ready to crush Alex with one easy swing. But before he could attack, a high-pitched alarm started screaming from his own belt. It was a tactical medical scanner, used by pirates to check for poisons or traps. The device was flashing a bright, angry red light, and the noise was piercing. The pirates looked confused. One of the crack soldiers looked at the scanner's screen and gasped in shock. The numbers on the screen were scrolling up faster than they had ever seen. The scanner had detected a massive spike of chemicals in the room. It was not coming from a leak in the ship, it was radiating from the human standing 10 feet away. The machine screamed a warning that a Class 5 combat stimulant was present. This was the highest level of illegal drug known in the galaxy. The reading showed that the level of the drug was so high, it should have killed any living creature instantly. The pirates stopped laughing. They took a step back, looking at Alex with wide eyes. They did not understand human biology. They thought Alex was a drug addict who had just injected a suicide dose of Stim-X to gain power before dying. Brutus looked at the scanner and then back at Alex. He saw the human shaking violently. The pirates thought the shaking was fear or a drug overdose, but it was actually pure energy waiting to be released. Brutus snarled, believing the human would explode or die of a heart attack in seconds. He shouted that the soft skin was crazy to take such a lethal dose. They waited for Alex to fall, but Alex just tightened his grip on the wrench and took another step forward. For Alex, the world suddenly changed completely. The loud, screaming alarm from the pirate's belt started to sound deep and slow, like a dying battery. The dust particles floating in the air seemed to freeze in place. This was the famous human fight or flight response, the most dangerous survival tool in human history. His brain was processing information faster than a supercomputer. While the aliens were still blinking, Alex had already planned his next 3 moves. He did not feel the cold floor or the fear anymore. All pain and doubt were blocked out by the chemical flood. He was no longer a mechanic, he was a machine made of muscle and bone, programmed to survive at any cost. Brutus, tired of waiting for the human to die, roared and swung his heavy iron club. To the watching crew and the other pirates, the swing was a blur of motion, too fast to see. Captain Zord covered his eyes, thinking Alex was already dead. But to Alex, the club looked like it was moving through thick jelly. He saw it coming a mile away. He didn't even have to think to move. His legs exploded with power, pushing him to the left with incredible speed. The heavy weapon missed his head by only an inch, smashing into the metal wall with a shower of hot sparks. The Cracks pirates gasped in unison. No species without a hard shell or robotic legs was supposed to move that fast. Alex did not stop moving. Human muscles are usually limited by the brain to prevent injury, but the adrenaline had turned off all the safety switches. He possessed hysterical strength now. He stepped inside the pirate's guard and threw a punch. It was not a technical martial arts punch, it was a desperate, primal hammer blow. His fist, hard as a rock, slammed into the thick metal armor on Brutus's stomach. There was a sickening crunch sound that echoed through the room. It wasn't Alex's hand breaking, it was the alien metal denting inwards. The force of the blow lifted the giant lizard off his feet for a split second, knocking the wind out of him completely. Brutus stumbled back, gasping for air and clutching his dented armor. He looked at the human with pure horror. The medical scanner on his belt beeped a new, terrifying message, toxicity rising. Subject is critical. The pirates could not believe their eyes. The human had seemingly taken a hit of Stim-X strong enough to kill a giant beast, yet he was still standing. In fact, he was getting faster. Alex stood there, his chest heaving, steam almost rising from his shoulders due to his body heat. He let out a low, animalistic growl that didn't sound like a civilized person at all. The hunter had become the prey, and the natural drug in his veins was just getting started. The 3 remaining pirates finally snapped out of their shock. They raised their laser rifles, aiming directly at the human. Alex's survival instinct screamed at him to move. Nearby, there was a heavy loading table made of solid iron. It was bolted to the floor and usually required a hydraulic lift to move. Alex didn't think, he just acted. He grabbed the edge of the table and roared. With a sound of tearing metal, he ripped the bolt straight out of the floor and flipped the heavy table onto its side to use as a shield. Bright red laser blasts slammed into the table a second later, melting the metal but missing Alex. The crew of the Starhopper gasped. To them, lifting that table was physically impossible for a biological creature. It was a feat only a machine should be able to do. Alex did not stay behind the cover for long. He knew that if he stopped moving, the energy might fade. He vaulted over the table and sprinted straight toward the gunman. One pirate fired a lucky shot. The laser beam grazed Alex's shoulder, burning a hole through his uniform and scorching his skin. Any other species on the ship would have collapsed immediately from the shock of the burn. But Alex did not even slow down. The adrenaline in his system acted like a powerful painkiller. He felt the impact, but his brain refused to acknowledge the pain. He simply kept running, his eyes wide and focused, looking like a demon from an ancient myth. He crashed into the group of pirates like a human cannonball. He swung his wrench with terrifying force, knocking the laser rifles out of their claws. The fight was brutal and fast. Alex was not fighting with martial arts skill, he was fighting with pure, raw aggression. He threw one pirate into a wall and kicked another so hard that the alien flew backward into the cargo bay doors. He was panting loudly now, saliva dripping from his mouth, his heart rate high enough to kill a normal alien. He stood over them, shaking, looking around wildly for the next threat, his fists raised and ready to destroy anything that moved. The pirates were completely broken by fear. They had never seen a creature ignore a laser burn before. They looked at Alex's wild eyes and the steam rising from his overheating body. "Monster," one of them screamed in their native tongue. "The drug has made him immortal. Run." They realized they could not win against a creature that felt no pain and had the strength of a hydraulic press. Panic took over. The remaining pirates grabbed their unconscious leader, Brutus, by his legs. They dragged him toward the airlock, firing blind shots behind them, desperate to escape the drug-fueled madman before he killed them all. The pirate ship detached from the Starhopper and sped away into the darkness of space. The loud roar of their engines faded, leaving the cargo bay in total silence. Alex stood alone in the center of the room, surrounded by broken metal and overturned tables. For a moment, he looked like a statue of a warrior. But then, the chemical storm inside his body stopped. The human body cannot stay in super mode forever. The adrenaline suddenly drained away, leaving his system completely empty. The wrench slipped from his sweaty fingers and hit the floor with a loud clang. Alex's knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the cold metal deck. He began to shake violently, his teeth chattering as if he were freezing to death. The pain that the adrenaline had blocked suddenly came rushing back all at once. Alex gasped, clutching his burned shoulder. His stomach twisted, and he rolled over and vomited on the floor. This was the crash, the price humans pay for their temporary superpowers. His body had burned through all its energy reserves in just 2 minutes. To the alien crew peeking out from their hiding spots, this looked exactly like a drug overdose. Captain Zord rushed forward, his feathers ruffled in panic. He shouted for Bip, the medic, to bring the emergency detox kit. They believed Alex was dying because no biological creature could handle such a high dose of Stim-X without their heart exploding. Bip ran to Alex's side with a large syringe designed to neutralize poisons. The small medic was crying, thinking his human friend had sacrificed his life for them. Bip quickly scanned Alex's blood to see which antidote to use. The scanner hummed and printed the results on a holographic screen. Bip froze. He looked at the data, then at Alex, then back at the data. The medic's large eyes went wide with confusion and horror. He lowered the syringe. There were no synthetic chemicals in Alex's blood. There were no injection marks on his arms. There were no pills in his stomach. The drug was entirely natural. "Captain," Bip whispered, his voice trembling. "He didn't take any drugs. We cannot detox him. His own glands produced the Stim-X. His body, it is a weapon factory." The crew gathered around, staring at the unconscious human in shock. They watched Alex sleeping heavily, his chest rising and falling. 10 minutes ago, he was a soft, weak mechanic. 5 minutes ago, he was an unstoppable monster. Now, he was just a sleeping boy. They realized that humans were not weak, they were just dormant. They walked around with a biological switch that could turn them into berserkers instantly. Captain Zorg looked at the sleeping human with a new kind of respect and fear. He quietly ordered the crew to carry Alex to the best medical bed. "Let him sleep," Zorg said softly to the crew. "And make a note in the ship's log, never, ever make the human angry."